Hey there, welcome to Have You Tried Rolling Better, a miniature wargaming channel focused on tactical wargaming content. Today we'll be focusing on Marvel Crisis Protocol with a simple question: who's the Beatdown? If you're a Magic the Gathering or wargaming veteran, you might be familiar with the question. It's the title of a landmark Magic the Gathering article from 1999 describing two key roles in any Magic game: Beatdown and Control. The article may be focused on Magic, but the concepts are key to understanding any 1v1 strategy game. The control player represents the status quo and is presumed to win the game the longer it goes. The beatdown player, on the other hand, must upset the status quo and use aggression to end the game before the control player's long-term advantage is realized. This goes beyond predefined roles, though. If two control strategies face off, one is more control than the other, and one of them must play the role of beatdown because in the long term the other player's advantage scales more, and conversely, two aggressive strategies will inevitably find one playing the role of control as they have a long-term advantage. In Magic, the kind of questions to sort control from beatdown are as follows. Number 1. Who has more damage output? Usually the beatdown deck. 2. Who has more removal? Usually the control deck. And 3. Who has more permission in card drawing? Almost always has to be the control deck. Now, obviously these don't track with Marvel Crisis Protocol. Instead of investing resources to reduce an opponent's life total to 0, Marvel Crisis Protocol is focused around moving characters into particular positions to pick up or hold scenario elements with the goal of accumulating 16 victory points or having the most victory points by round 6. The latter victory condition puts a timer on the game and puts an emphasis on being ahead of your opponent at all times. Additionally, with the high variance of dice and the alternating activation structure of the game, the roles of control and beatdown can change at any time. To that end, I'll apply these litmus test items to determine control versus beatdown for Marvel Crisis Protocol. Number 1. Who has more VPs? Usually the control team. Number 2. Who has a higher VP scored per turn? Again, usually the control team. And then number 3. Who is better at attrition? Some combination of dealing and tanking damage. Also, usually the control team. You'll notice it's harder to explicitly define a beatdown team for Marvel Crisis Protocol. That's because it's significantly harder to index into early/late game strategies than it is for Magic the Gathering. Outside of Wakanda Wave, which we will discuss in a second, there are very few expressly beatdown strategies available to players. That makes it even more important to be constantly reading the state of the game to figure out whether you are currently in the role of control or beatdown and make decisions appropriately. For the control player, the goal is to play as conservatively as possible without losing your momentum. This puts increased value on pushes and throws that limit your opponent's ability to attack you. Additionally, moving to positions where you're as far from enemy characters while still holding secure objectives is something that should be seriously considered. You're also somewhat incentivized to make moves that make both players score more if it doesn't incur risk to you, as it might end the game faster while not changing the roles. This often takes the form of moving to an uncontested secure objective rather than moving to contest a secure your opponent is holding. Beatdown, on the other hand, is focused on changing things up above all other priorities. If something doesn't change, the beatdown player will lose. So aggressively going after a character holding an extract with a move and an attack is often better than double attacking an easier target. Also, in contrast with control players who like both players scoring more, the beatdown player prefers both players scoring less, all things equal. This gives more time to alter the status quo in your favor. A simple and fast way to think of evaluating whether you're currently the control or beatdown player is to take a page out of your old algebra textbook and use a basic linear equation. If you take the classic y equals mx plus b and set the m to the number of victory points you're earning each turn, and b to the number of victory points you already have, and x to the number of turns left in the game, you can figure out who will have more VPs at the end of the game. This, of course, assumes nothing changes in the remaining turns, but it does help you know whether you want to be maintaining the status quo or whether you have to change things up. Now that we've got some of the basic terms and combinations down, let's apply what we've learned to a scenario combination that's quite common in my experience. Gamma wave sweeps across Midwest, and fear grips world as worthy terrorize cities. This is a very attrition and brawling focused scenario, which seems to be somewhat divisive in the community currently. Hammers are worth 1 VP each, while the shelters are worth 1, 2, and 3 VPs respectively, depending on how close they are to your deployment zone. There's also the punitive measure of taking damage every round you stray too far from the shelters, which can help nickel and dime players out of both scenario and attrition with pushes and throws. You might have noticed, if you hold your home shelter and the middle shelter in one hammer, you score as much as a player with their home shelter and all 3 of the other hammers. That makes a middle-focused team with maybe a single flanker to pick up one of the side hammers very attractive. It also puts the struggle for the middle shelter in the forefront, with whomever holds it typically assuming the role of control, while the other player as Beatdown desperately attempts to wrest control of it back. One of the most classically obnoxious teams on a Gamma/Hammers board is something called the Wakanda Wave, consisting of Black Panther, Shuri, Okoye, Doc Ock, and Valkyrie at 15 points. The team does not have above average damage output or durability, but instead every character except for Okoye can either push or throw opponents, allowing them to remove characters from claiming or contesting secure objectives without dazing them. The main goal of such a list is to maintain a large scenario advantage in the first few rounds and try and ride that early advantage to victory. Converse to the mantra of VP advantage usually means control, the VP velocity can often crumble rounds 3 through 6 due to attritional disadvantages and put their opponent in the control seat. Most normal lists should recognize this and emphasize attrition, as well as going after the extract objectives, which you can't be pushed off of. Now, let's look at a very different example. Alien ship crashes in downtown and deadly meteors mutate civilians. Both of these scenarios focus aggressively on approaching the middle line of the board. Both elements let you move once you've either found the extract element or flipped the secure element to your side, and to have the most pressure you need to be able to hold the middle and at least one flank, and ideally lots of energy defenses to help flip the secure. From an early to middle game standpoint, it's easy to figure out who is the controller of the beatdown. Holding origin bombs is 3 victory points a turn, holding the ship core is 2 victory points a turn. If one player is holding each, the player holding the origin bombs is control, because 3 victory points per turn is worth more than 2. If one player is holding both, the other player is 100% the beatdown, and will almost assuredly lose if they don't change the status quo immediately. From personal experience, Avengers with Thor is one of the best teams to field on a board like this. Lots of good midline options with high energy defenses that can switch focus from a flank to the middle or vice versa. It's very tanky as well, so coming into a matchup you should be prepared to fight bitterly for the middle. It's also important to recognize the scenario play. If you're choosing between double attacking a juicy target or double moving to flip an origin bomb to lock in those 3 victory points per turn, evaluate the board state. Does taking that origin bomb put you in the control seat, or are you already comfortably ahead and want to daze a key piece going into the next round? There is, however, one victory condition we have glossed over in this discussion. If you KO every character on your opponent's team, you win regardless of VPs. This is admittedly quite difficult due to the daze mechanic. Every character, except Hulk, has to be taken down across 2 or more rounds. That said, sometimes the VP difference is too high for you to catch up before round 6, and you have to go into super beatdown mode. This means every move has to be focused around maximizing damage, dazes, KOs, and making sure every one of your opponent's characters are at least injured before the final round. Personally, I've been on both sides of concessions because KO is someone's only out, and they fail to daze the last character on round 5, which means a total knockout isn't possible on round 6. As a player in a VP advantage situation, it's very important to recognize that your opponent might eventually be forced to go for this out, and position your characters such that the attacks that can be used on them is minimized. On the other side of the coin, the player going for a total knockout has to do as much attrition as possible while being careful that they don't accidentally let the opponent end a game too early by interacting with a scenario element that they otherwise couldn't have. In a game whose board state can change as drastically and quickly as Marvel Crisis Protocol, it can be hard to tell at any given moment who's in the lead, which honestly is a good thing. It makes games fresh from start to finish, while letting you make interesting choices the whole way through. That said, evaluating the board state at each and every turn to know whether you are protecting a lead or needing to generate one can be a huge help in making the right decision and give you a big leg up on your opponent. And on top of that, understanding the scenario given will help you know the best way to build a team to assume control and maintain it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe so you can be notified the second new videos go up. Have a moment where you made a crazy play to take control from an opponent? Let us know in the comments below. Additionally, if you have any feedback on this video format or ideas for more episodes, I'd love to hear from you.